In the dead of night, in a small ground-floor apartment in Gresham, Oregon, the silence didn't just break, it shattered. Neighbors, wrapped in the perceived safety of their own homes, would later recall the sounds that bled through the walls. Screams, the sharp, violent crash of things breaking, desperate cries that seemed to hang in the air unanswered, and yet, in that building, filled with people, not a single person picked up the phone to call for help. It would be hours before officers finally arrived. And when they did, they walked into a scene of such unbridled personal violence that it would leave even the most seasoned detectives profoundly shaken. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. Nothing of value was taken. There was no forced entry in the way you might expect, no door kicked off its hinges. Instead, every single detail pointed to something far more intimate, something terrifying, something personal. And at the center of it all was a young mother who had been fighting for her life until the very brutal end. The victim was Annie Hester, but to everyone who loved her, she was simply Annie. Gresham, Oregon, wasn't just a place she lived, it was her entire world. She had spent her entire life there, and that life hadn't been easy. Her childhood was marked by the kind of hardship that can either break a person or forge them into steel. When her father died, she was just a teenager, a loss that left her leaning heavily on her mother and stepfather. But through those years of grief and rebuilding, Annie stayed deeply connected to her family. Annie was resilient. Ask anyone who knew her, and they'd tell you the same thing. Annie was dependable. She was strong-willed, the kind of person who never hesitated to step up. She was a hard worker, and she had a natural, quiet talent for leadership, traits that she carried into every corner of her life. But beneath that responsible, hard-working exterior was a vibrant, creative soul. What truly lit Annie up was her passion for games, role-playing adventures, bustling cosplay festivals, the quiet camaraderie of local game shops. This was her joy. This was where she could be herself. And it was in the world of shared interests and fantasy, that she reconnected with a man named Matthew Hester. They had history. The two had first met years earlier, back in 1999, but Matt had been married to someone else at the time. Life, as it does, had carried them in different directions. But now, fate, or what they believed was fate, brought them back together in that local game store. By this time, Matt was divorced. This chance encounter quickly blossomed into a new relationship. In 2008, Annie and Matt were married. A few years later, in 2011, their daughter, Alice, was born. She brought a new, brilliant light into Annie's world, but the happiness that filled their home, it wasn't built to last. Just 1 year after Alice's birth, Annie was faced with a devastating betrayal. Matt had repeated the very same mistake that had ended his first marriage: infidelity. Annie tried. You have to understand, she tried to forgive. She tried to rebuild that broken trust for the sake of her new daughter, but the foundation was gone, shattered by more lies and more broken promises. And she knew she had to make a painful, impossible decision. She filed for divorce. She was now a single mother. The change was brutal. Annie and little Alice moved into a modest one-bedroom apartment, and in a perfect snapshot of the mother she was, Annie gave her daughter the privacy of the only bedroom. She herself slept on a mattress in the living room. Exhaustion became her constant companion, but Annie never slowed down. By day, she worked in an after-school program, caring for other people's children. In the evenings, she clocked in for a second shift at a downtown call center. Her dedication was impossible to miss, and over time, she earned a managerial position. The hours were long, draining, and an absolute necessity. Matt's child support payments were unreliable at best. He drifted from job to job, leaving Annie to shoulder the entire financial burden alone. But Annie never gave up. Every single ounce of energy she had was spent ensuring that Alice had what she needed. Even when Matt remarried, this time to a woman named Angela, Annie kept things civil, for Alice's sake. The two families would even share dinners or go on outings together. through all the struggle, all the exhaustion, Annie never lost that creative spark. At Christmas, it was handmade decorations for her loved ones. She designed personalized cards adorned with photos of Alice. On the weekends, when Alice stayed with her father, Annie didn't rest. She used that time to take on side jobs, often painting faces at local events. For her, staying busy meant survival, but it also meant expression. She carried the weight of the world on her shoulders, and she did it with a quiet, powerful strength. In the summer of 2016, that strength was met with an unimaginable, terrifying violence. When officers were finally called to that quiet ground-floor apartment, the scene they found was a chilling contradiction. The entry wasn't through the door. It was through Alice's bedroom window. The window-mounted air conditioner had been ripped out, torn from its frame, and a block had been used to push it open. When police entered, they found the front door unlocked. And yet, inside, the apartment was strangely undisturbed. Nothing was ransacked. Nothing was stolen. This was not a burglary. This was an execution. The blood patterns told a story of pure abject terror. Annie had likely been asleep on her mattress in the living room when the killer struck. She had tried to escape. She had scrambled desperately toward the front door, but she never made it out. The attack she endured was monstrous. Over 60 stab wounds, many to her chest and head. The violence was so extreme, so personal, that the killer had even attempted to decapitate her. And then, police saw it. A final, grotesque message carved into her shoulder. 3 letters, V, X, V. No one could explain what it meant. Was it a message, a twisted symbol, or just a cruel, meaningless distraction left behind by a mind warped by rage? At the scene, 3 knives lay discarded on the carpet. Some had been taken from Annie's own kitchen block, and one folding knife that appeared to have been carried in by the attacker. Bloody shoe prints marked the floor leading toward the exit. Detectives were left to wonder. Was this the work of one killer? Or more than one? There was one small, profound mercy in all of this. Alice was safe. That night she had been staying with her father, Matt, and his new wife, Angela. Had she been home, in the very room the killer used to enter, she might have become a second victim. The timeline was the most haunting part of all. Neighbors reported hearing those first screams and crashes around 11:15 p.m. Others described loud arguments, slamming doors, groaning sounds that went on past 1 a.m. One neighbor would later admit they just turned up their television to drown out the chaos. Only one person in that entire building reached for a phone. Only one person called for help. That person was Annie herself. At 3 a.m., gasping for breath, barely able to speak, she managed to dial 911. It was the final, desperate act of a woman who refused to die. From the first screams at 11:15 p.m. to that call at 3 a.m., nearly 4 hours had passed. For investigators, that detail was chilling. This wasn't a brief frenzied attack. This was prolonged. This was cruel. This amounted to torture. Detectives were left searching for answers in the dark. They had no suspect. They had no clear motive. And they had no explanation for the strange 3-letter carving. The only thing they knew for certain was that someone had wanted Annie Hester dead and had gone to extraordinary lengths to make it happen. Where do you even begin with a crime this brutal? You start with the inner circle. Detectives immediately contacted Annie's ex-husband, Matt Hester, and his current wife, Angela. They were informed of Annie's death and asked to come to the station. Investigators needed to know, had there been any tension, any threats, any disputes? Matt insisted he didn't know of any enemies Annie might have had. He said their relationship was manageable, if distant. His only real concern, he claimed, was the well-being of their daughter, Alice. He told investigators point-blank that he and Angela had been home all night with Alice and Angela's 3 other children. They had spent the evening playing video games, then went to bed around 10 p.m. Angela confirmed the story. She added that she was a light sleeper, and if Matt had left during the night, she would have noticed. Still, detectives couldn't ignore Matt's demeanor. The mother of his child had just been slaughtered in the most horrific way imaginable, and he didn't seem shaken. He didn't seem grieved. He seemed indifferent. His focus, strangely, was already on custody arrangements and Alice's future. He described his feelings toward Annie as mostly indifferent, saying he wanted as little to do with her as possible. He did admit he had cheated during their marriage, but then claimed they'd had an open relationship. According to Matt, Annie had also explored polyamorous relationships, including one with a couple she met at a pirate-themed role-playing event. Investigators quickly tracked that couple down. They were cleared of any involvement. And then there was Matt's physical state. He walked with a pronounced limp. He used a cane. He was clearly dealing with health issues. Looking at the sheer, unadulterated ferocity of that crime scene, the force it would take to inflict more than 60 stab wounds. Detectives had to question whether someone in his condition could have possibly committed such an attack. At least, not alone. Angela was interviewed repeating the same story, in bed by 10, scrolling on their phones until they fell asleep. Their household, she explained, was chaotic. 4 children, a dog, even tenants renting out parts of the property, including the garage. Angela's close friend, Karina, was the one staying in that garage, and she told police she was certain Matt and Angela had been home all night. She said if a car had left the driveway, she would have heard it immediately. Both Matt and Angela surrendered their phones voluntarily. Nothing incriminating surfaced. At that point, with no solid evidence, they were released. The search for answers stretched into the surrounding area. Detectives brought in search and rescue teams. They combed through the brush along the nearby Springwater Trail with dogs and helicopters. The trail was notorious for transient activity and drug use, and residents of the neighborhood were terrified. Many believed Annie may have just crossed paths with a dangerous drifter, but the deeper investigators looked into Annie's life and the details of her custody battle with Matt, the less that random drifter theory seemed to fit. The idea of peaceful co-parenting was unraveling. Fast. Everything had changed when Angela entered Matt's life. What began as her simply renting a room quickly turned into a relationship. And from that point on, tensions with Annie only escalated. Angela reportedly didn't want Matt communicating with Annie at all, and Matt himself became more and more insistent on having Alice full-time. Their struggle finally ended up in court, just 1 month before Annie's murder. The ruling came down like a hammer blow. Full custody of Alice was awarded to Annie. On top of that, Matt was ordered to pay more than $13,000 in back child support, plus nearly $30,000 in legal fees. And here was the reality. Neither Matt nor Angela was employed. They had no income. The financial and personal strain was immense. And Annie had won. For detectives, one pressing question remained. How were Matt and Angela supposed to pay? Matt spent most of his time at home pouring his energy into fantasy writing and creating elaborate role-playing games. He and Angela even managed a small YouTube channel together where he shared his fictional worlds. But that didn't pay the bills. When it came to the thousands of dollars owed to Annie, they had no income to fall back on. Their explanation was that they were full-time caregivers. They claimed their children struggled with mental health issues, and because of that, they received government benefits and financial assistance. But Angela's ex-husband, Aaron, told investigators a chilling story. He said this very obsession with diagnosing and medicating children had ended their marriage. He said Angela constantly believed her kids needed prescription drugs, even when doctors disagreed. To him, it was dangerous, it was unnecessary. And Aaron revealed Angela's focus eventually shifted to Alice, Annie's daughter. She became convinced that Alice was bipolar, a claim Annie strongly, fiercely denied. Annie grew fearful. She believed Angela was attempting to use Alice's name and fabricated condition as a way to gain additional benefits. Experts would later confirm Annie was right to worry. A licensed psychologist explained that labeling normal developmental behavior as mental illness was harmful. Official diagnostic standards for bipolar disorder didn't even exist for children under 6. The conflict escalated. A call was made to Child Protective Services, an anonymous report accusing Annie of neglect. Annie didn't know who had made the call, but she was devastated. Though the case was quickly dismissed and deemed unfounded, the emotional toll weighed heavily on her. In an email to a friend, she wrote in anguish, "I just don't understand. What did I do to deserve all of this?" For investigators, the motive was becoming clearer by the day. Custody, jealousy, and money. 3 powerful primal reasons for Matt and Angela to want Annie gone. But motive alone wasn't enough. They still lacked the evidence. Detectives brought the couple back in for further questioning. This time, Matt surprised investigators. He voluntarily removed his shirt, showing them his torso, proving he had no cuts, no scratches. In a case where the victim had so desperately fought for her life, detectives believed the killer would almost certainly have injuries, yet Matt insisted he had nothing to hide. Angela, for her part, said little. She kept her head down, complaining she wasn't feeling well. But then, she introduced new details that flatly contradicted her original statement. She admitted that at around 3 a.m. on the night of the murder, the exact hour Annie called 911, she had actually been awake. According to her new story, she had taken the dogs outside, then suddenly became violently ill. So ill, she claimed, that Matt had to help her shower and change her clothes. This new account placed both of them awake and moving at the very hour of the attack. Still, without hard evidence, detectives were forced to release them again, but this time they launched covert surveillance, and what they found was alarming. Footage showed Matt, the man who leaned heavily on a cane in the interrogation room, moving around with no difficulty at all, carrying heavy shopping bags, doing yard work, walking without a cane. The frailty he had displayed, it now looked like an act. Even more damning, a neighbor's security camera captured a vehicle, leaving Matt and Angela's driveway just before 1 a.m. And it was heading in the direction of Annie's apartment. Their housemate, Karina, the one sleeping in the garage, had told police she was certain she hadn't heard anything. But now, detectives had to wonder, was she protecting her friends? The contradictions were piling up. Matt and Angela had lied. The facade of innocence was quickly unraveling. By the 1-year mark, Annie's family was still waiting. The brutal nature of her murder made it impossible to accept the silence. A reward was offered. But as the months passed, the case remained unsolved. The pain Annie's family endured was indescribable. Her mother later said she would never want another parent to experience what they had. Public appeals followed. Police urged anyone with information to come forward. Meanwhile, Matt and Angela had quietly relocated nearly 700 miles away, making cooperation difficult. But detectives were patient. They knew that forensic science might one day uncover what human testimony could not. Then came the breakthrough. DNA tests were completed on the knives collected from the crime scene. The results were undeniable. The blood and DNA matched Angela. In October 2017, over a year after Annie's murder, police tracked Angela to Pocatello, Idaho. There, she was arrested on 2 counts of aggravated murder and 1 count of first-degree theft. As she was taken into custody, Angela erupted in anger, shouting that she had children at home, demanding answers. Despite her protests, detectives stood firm. She was now charged with intentionally killing Annie. And prosecutors added another count, alleging deliberate acts of torture. She pleaded not guilty, maintaining her innocence. Detectives turned again to Matt. They showed him the photos from Annie's autopsy, hoping to finally break through his wall of indifference. At first, he continued to deny involvement. But then, he admitted it. He admitted that Angela had come home the night of the murder covered in blood. He claimed she was panicking, and all he did was help her clean up. He insisted he had no idea what she had done, though he also admitted that he and Angela had often talked about killing Annie in the past. Still, Matt tried to deflect, this time onto Angela's ex-husband, Aaron. Detectives interrogated Aaron thoroughly. They found no evidence. He was never charged. Court records revealed the gruesome details of what Angela was accused of: stabbing Annie more than 60 times, attempting to decapitate her, and carving those 3 letters, VXV, into her skin. It was a crime defined by pure, unadulterated rage. But the most damning evidence of all came from a Google Map search. Just 3 days after the murder, Angela had looked up a location in Mount Hood National Forest. Detectives followed that digital trail, and there, buried beside a tree, they discovered a boot. It matched the bloody shoe print found at the crime scene. A diver later recovered a plastic bag nearby containing Angela's clothing, the tread pattern, the size, the purchase records, all tied directly back to her. The evidence was overwhelming. And then one final sickening detail surfaced. Annie had a $100,000 life insurance policy. Her parents were the beneficiaries. Yet shortly after her death, a call came into the insurance company. Not from them. It was from Matt. He casually inquired whether he or Alice might be eligible for a payout. When told no information could be given, he hung up. By 2019, prosecutors had built their case further. Matt was charged with 2 counts of conspiracy to commit murder, 1 count of solicitation to commit murder, and 1 count of hindering prosecution. Like Angela, he pleaded not guilty, but the weight of the evidence became impossible to ignore. In 2020, Angela changed her plea. She admitted to second-degree murder. She was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Matt's fate came later. In 2021, he pleaded guilty to soliciting Angela's brother to commit murder, as well as hindering prosecution. His sentence was light, shockingly light, just 56 months in prison, less than 5 years. Many saw it as a controversial decision, but prosecutors believed it was strategic. If stronger evidence against Matt emerged in the future, they wanted to preserve the option of charging him again with conspiracy. An acquittal would have made that impossible. Angela and Matt divorced while behind bars. Angela has never spoken publicly about Annie since her arrest. When asked by visitors, she only says, "That's between me and God." Angela's children entered foster care, and Alice was adopted by Annie's mother. In the end, Alice found safety and love within the family that Annie had always wanted to protect her. Those who worked with Annie, those who knew her, they remembered her as more than a victim. She was a source of inspiration, someone who worked tirelessly, carried heavy burdens, and still managed to create joy for others. Her positivity, even in the darkest of times, left a lasting impression on everyone. And even in her final moments in that apartment for 4 terrifying hours, Annie showed what she had always embodied: strength, resilience, and a fierce, unimaginable determination to fight. And that's where we'll leave the story for today. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for being here and seeing it through. Please share your thoughts in the comments. I read everyone I can. To everyone who has supported our work, I can't thank you enough. You are the engine that allows me to keep pursuing these important stories for this amazing community. There's more to come. Until then, take care.